A long time ago, a kind couple lived in a small cottage by the sea. The man was a fisherman and would set sail before sunrise on his little boat, while his wife stayed home mending the nets. They were lonely by themselves, and for many years they wished for a child. Just when all hope seemed lost, they were blessed with a baby who they named Teodoro, meaning gift from God. Teodoro was born on a full moon. On that evening, as the sun was setting, his mother put out a saucer of yeast, just as she had on every other full moon.
Spero che la Jana verrà stanotte e che darà sua benedizione a piccolo Teodoro.
As night fell and all were soundly asleep, a faint blue light glimmered through the window. It was the Jana. She had always been fond of this couple, admiring their humility and benevolence. Like mist, she slid under the infant's window. Her ethereal beauty was unparalleled. Her dress was woven from the finest fabrics and embellished with precious stones. She approached the crib and was overcome by the baby's pure spirit. She softly placed her hand on his head, then began to sing. As she sang, her light shone brighter, and in that magical melody she poured every blessing imaginable upon the child. She left a little trinket box in the boy's crib and departed through the window in a blur of mist. As the little one grew, Jana faithfully watched over the child and his parents like a guardian angel. When the father's catch was poor and there was only bread on the table, she would leave some of her treasures in the little trinket box. The years passed in this way, and the neighbors would all exclaim, "Bene vadada," when the boy's mother told them of their good fortune. Teodoro was now growing up and had always been aware of Jana's presence. He had heard of the mysterious Jana Fairies in other villages, but he had also heard of the Malayana, who were wicked and played tricks. He was worried. What if their fairy was actually a Malayana? In his heart, he knew that she had been by his side from as long as he could remember, and he was determined to catch a glimpse of his secretive guardian. Now 11 years old, he hatched a plan that wouldn't fail. He went to bed fully clothed, then covered himself up and pretended to sleep. It had just passed midnight when the dark of the room was pierced with her unmistakable blue light. Teodoro kept his eyes tightly shut, and for the first time he heard her mystical song. It was so familiar to him, and he felt himself slipping away almost into a trance as the magical notes enveloped him. When the room began to dim, he threw off his sheets and crept out of the window. In the midnight dark, it was easy to follow Jana's glow. She had gone into the forest and disappeared into what looked like a tiny cave. The entrance was made of large stones that had strange symbols on them. There was a faint glimmer from inside the cave and the sound of singing. The boy crept in slowly and gasped. He had never seen anything so enchanting in all his life. The room was full of beautiful Jana. They were singing together and weaving fabric that looked like silver and gold. In the crowd, he spotted his Jana, and as soon as he set his eyes on her, she looked up and fixed her stare on him. He dashed out of the cave in a panic and ran home as fast as his legs could carry him. The next morning when he woke up, his little trinket box had been left open. Inside was a note. It was from Jana, but he couldn't understand the language it was written in. Suddenly he heard her voice, as though she were in the room reading the note to him.
Mio carissimo Teodoro, non volevo spaventarti. Eri molto coraggioso, ma ti devo chiedere di farmi una promessa. Non rilevare a nessuno quello che hai visto ieri notte, per evitare che un ladro venga a rubare il nostro tesoro.
He vowed to protect them, and from that day forward, he treasured her note in his pocket and didn't try to catch her anymore. Teodoro was now a fine young man and went out with his father in the morning to go fishing. He had grown to be very tall and handsome, and the young ladies in the village were all fascinated by him. Teodoro didn't show any interest in marriage. He was content spending his days fishing. In the evenings he would read Jana's note and remember her beautiful song. Somehow, he knew she was still alongside him, and he wished to see her again. One evening, overcome with longing, he set out for the woods, retracing his footsteps from that magical night. Before he reached the forest, he heard a female voice laughing. The bewitching laughter ensnared him, and in a daze he followed it until he reached a lake on the outskirts of the woods. Teodoro peered over the water's edge and looked at his reflection. Just then, a Malayana jumped up out of the lake and pulled him in. She was beautiful like the other fairies, but her features were cruel and hard. Teodoro burst out of the lake and ran for home. The Malayana had looked deep into his heart and knew just what to do to hurt him. About a year had passed, and the nearby village of Macomer was busy preparing its autumn festival. Teodoro and his family made the journey over to stay with relatives and joined in the festivities. Teodoro had heard that the Jana sometimes came to Macomer and danced with the humans to celebrate the year's harvest. He sat and watched hopefully while the others danced. Could it be that she would come? Suddenly, he felt a pull at his heart. He looked up and saw a familiar glow in the distance. Everyone cheered.
¡Saciadas! ¡Saciadas son arribadas!
As they gracefully waded through the crowd, the band began to play Il Ballo Tondo, which means the round dance, and the Jana and humans formed a big circle. Beaming in the midst of the pearlescent glow, he saw the unmistakable blue shimmer of his beloved Jana. Their eyes met, and he felt his heart fluttering in nervous excitement. He offered her his hand, and they joined in the Ballo Tondo. Out in the distant field, the Malayana watched jealously. She was almost ready. Teodoro was finally enjoying a dance alone with his beloved, who sang his song to him once more. He had never felt such happiness and wished this moment would last forever. As the music stopped, the good cheer was shattered by a scream.
Kirkaddi sos butones!
All the buttons on his Jana's dress, which were made of the most precious stones, had been stolen, and fingers began to point to Teodoro. The Jana all began to shriek and wail. She looked up at Teodoro, shaking with anger, and let out a fearful scream. Before he could say anything, all the Jana turned to mist and vanished in a swirl overhead. The Malayana stood in the distance, tossing the stolen jewels in her hand. Her curse had been cast. Teodoro was heartbroken. He never heard Jana's song again. Years passed by, and he looked out across the ocean, longing to see her once more. He faithfully waited for Jana. Now an old man, he was traveling the country roads, heading to Alghero. As he walked, he found himself lost in the woods. He stumbled across a familiar scene. Hidden behind some ivy was a little stone cave with the same unusual symbols he had seen as a child. He was too big to crawl inside now. He sat himself down by the entrance and opened up a locket he had around his neck. Inside was the note she had left him all those years ago. He slowly closed his tearful eyes and called out to her, then fell into a strange sleep, clutching his precious note in his hands.
Teodoro, 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 apri gli occhi.
He heard a familiar voice rousing him. He woke up to find his beautiful Jana holding out her hand to him. He reached for her and gasped to see his arm rejuvenated before his eyes. It was no longer the wrinkled arm of an 80-year-old, but the strong arm of his former youth. In the Malayana's treasure chest, her stolen jewels from all those years ago turned to coal. The years melted away, and young, handsome Teodoro stood transformed before her, and the pair vanished in a misty embrace. Domus de Jana is Sardinian dialect for fairy houses, and there are thousands throughout the island that you can go and visit. Some of them are over 6,000 years old, and archaeologists believe they may have been used as tombs. Jana were magical women of very small stature, known for their unparalleled beauty. They were believed to be fairies, fortune tellers and weavers of children's destiny. They had hidden treasure that they would readily share with you if you were good. If you tried to steal their treasure, their wickedness knew no bounds. Sardinians believe that the Jana blessed the women of the island with their beauty and their skill as seamstresses. If we look at Sardinian costumes and embroidery, it isn't hard to believe that this impressive skill was handed down by the Jana. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Please visit me next time for more adventures. Ciao, ciao.